Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we have a lot to get into on tonight's episode as we're going to discuss the Orioles offense having a little bit of a disappointing weekend against the Pirates while the Norfolk Tide surged in their series against the Charlotte Knights. Is it time to start flipping the roster around a little bit? Time to make some moves between AAA and the majors. Later on this week, we're going to take a look at the full season minor league affiliates, Bowie, Delmarva, and Aberdeen, and how their first weekends went. And we're going to take questions from listeners. But first, as we like to do at the start of every episode, we want to welcome a new member of our Patreon community. And with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. Love seeing the new signups at the beginning of the year. It makes me get even more excited about the season because that just means more people are excited with us. Thank you, Sumya Adhikari, for becoming a patron for a year up front. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the content.
As a reminder, you can sign up for our Patreon community, become a paying member for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels, have access to bonus daily coverage. We were happy over the weekend to be back into covering all 4 of the Orioles full season affiliates on our dailies. And sometimes stuff we discussed in the dailies makes it onto the show. So definitely something you want to listen to. Be in on the trends that are going on in the Orioles farm system a little bit ahead of everyone else. Now into the main topic for this episode, which is the Orioles offense not really showing up in a disappointing weekend series at Pittsburgh. Things started off good with a 5-2 win on Friday, but then the Orioles would lose a 5-4 contest in extra innings on Saturday before being defeated 3-2 on Sunday. Sunday's game ended in walk-off fashion with Yennier Cano being charged with the blown save. And while it did spoil a good outing from Dean Kramer, and Cano ultimately is the one charged with the loss, the Orioles offense deserves a lot of blame for the way that game turned out, collecting just 6 hits with 2 runs scored after kind of an up and down performance on Saturday. Meanwhile, down at the AAA level, the Norfolk Tides just destroyed the Charlotte Knights in a 6-game series. There were a few close ones in there, but just to rattle off some of the scores for you. Tuesday night, they defeated Charlotte 10-6, followed it up with a 26, you heard that right, 26-11 win over Charlotte, then a 9-8 victory, an 11-10 victory, a 13-1 win before dropping the Sunday finale by a final of 6-2. And Norfolk's lineup is getting contributions from the players that you would expect to be producing well right now. Jackson Holliday, Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, Kyle Stowers, Heston Kjerstad, among others. Peyton Burdick has performed pretty well to this point. So when you look at that and you look at the Orioles offense struggling right now, it starts to become more tempting to flip those guys around. And a friend of the show, John Mioli, wrote a very good article about this in the Baltimore Banner on Monday morning. If you have not checked it out yet, I definitely would encourage you to do so because it's a good analysis of the Orioles' problems and what has been going on at Norfolk. And with that, I'm going to go to Nick now. And Nick, first of all, welcome back. But as you look at the Orioles' recent struggles at the plate and the Tides lineup booming the way that it has, is it becoming a lot more tempting to you to start bringing players up from AAA to try to supplement some of these problems in the majors?
Yes. There's one player in particular down there in Norfolk that I think at this point should be on the Major League roster. But I guess I'll start with this. I'll start with a more positive take here instead of just diving in right now and being like, call this guy up right now. This isn't working anymore. I will say this, just generally speaking about this team at the Major League level first, that I think some of the issues like this team can't hit left-handed pitching, this lineup needs a complete overhaul, we've got to dump this guy, we've got to dump that guy. I think it's a little much 2 weeks into the year. And I think this was just this first week or so, especially this past weekend, or really these last 2 series, I think it was just a really unfortunate combination of some of the right-handed bats not firing on all cylinders or many cylinders or any cylinder at all to begin the year, and just this whirlwind of left-handed pitchers that the Orioles faced. I know they weren't quality lefters outside of Cole Reagans, who is a monster in the best possible way, But I feel like it's just been a lot of unfortunate timing. And we're talking about a small sample size, and everybody's super jacked up and ready for this season. And it's World Series, aspirations for this team and for the fan base. And opening day was so amazing, kind of rocking Sandoval there, a lefty. And then the team just kind of gone flat outside of like Mountcastle's performing well, obviously. Adley's performing well. Gunner, Ryan O'Hearn's got a couple of good at bats as well. But guys like that you really need to step up, like Ramon Arias, Austin Hayes, they're just not showing up at all, really. And so I think it's just been unfortunate timing. So, like, there is one guy, like I mentioned, that I do want up on this Major League roster right now, but I'm not going to be too mad, honestly, at this point. The Orioles still have a winning record. I feel even more confident about this team when I look at the rest of the American League after watching some baseball for the first 2 weeks or so. And we'll see how this shakes out over the next couple of days. But I think it's really just unfortunate timing of events and just guys not getting going early enough in the season so far. And I think it'll all pan out in over the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll say like this weekend was a heartbreaker because it seemed like both of those games we could have won, should have won, just slipped through our fingers. The game you fight, you come back, you tie it up, you take a lead, and then you blow it. That sucks. You waste a Danny Coulomb, excellent performance, escape artist. And then Sunday, Dean Kramer, 7 no earned runs allowed, looks great. And then, that happens in the bottom of the ninth and you lose it. But can't blame Gunnar Henderson. I know that for sure. I mean, kid's trying to make a play. A lot of guys don't even get to that ball. And he almost made the game-winning double play. So I can't really fault him for that. Just bad, like you said, unfortunate timing as far as the bats being cold. I think we were spoiled by the first 2 games of the year. The bats were just like scorching hot, scoring double-digit runs, and then they all went cold around the same time. And I think, look, last year we started 4-5, I think 8-9. Like, it wasn't the greatest start ever last season either, and we saw how that turned out. But I think my favorite comment that I've seen is that the Orioles are 5-4. It's disappointing. 5-4 correlated over the full course of a season is 90 wins, which that's a playoff team. So, and we know these guys are going to play better. These guys are going to hit better. We know guys like Westberg are streaky. Mullins, he missed 2 weeks in spring training. He might not be completely caught up to speed. Like, these guys are going to hit. The pitching's been fantastic. The defense, that started out slow last year too. I think we know who we have on this team, and we know what's coming, whether it's soon or a little bit later than maybe we want. Not worried about the season at all. But yeah, we could have very easily lost some of those games against Kansas City and then won these games against Pittsburgh. I think our luck kind of evened out there. But yeah, I think this team's going to play better sooner rather than later.
What's frustrating right now is, as I watch a game, I feel like if someone in the first 5 spots in the order doesn't produce, then it's lost, because you get down to 6, 7, 8, 9, and things just drop off most nights. And you hit on some of the guys that have struggled to this point: Arias, Mullins, Hayes. They, all 3 of them, and I don't want to single those 3 out as being the main problem because that's not fair to them. Everyone has had a bad day to this point, and that's going to happen in the course of a season. But the bottom of the order just isn't really picking up the slack right now. So if you're the other team's pitching staff, you have to feel like, okay, if I can get past Gunnar and Adley and keep at least one of them off base before I have to face Ryan Mountcastle, I'm going to get through this order unscathed. Because right now, that's how the lineup looks. Now, I do think some of that's going to turn around. I don't think that Austin Hayes, and I know he's kind of a popular target for scoring right now, I don't think Austin Hayes is going to be this bad all year. I think eventually things are going to click for Ramon Arias. Mullins worries me a little bit because he didn't really hit well in the second half last year, but we also know he has not really been healthy for close to a year now. So there's just a lot of ups and downs that the Orioles are going to have to sort through. One positive sign I will say, though, I really like the way the Colton Cowser looks. He's taking really good at bats. He's making hard contact. The home run power isn't there yet, but it's eventually going to come around in some form. So I really like the way Cowser is playing. And I think in the short term, you could take advantage of the fact that now the Orioles are moving into a part of the schedule where they're going to be facing largely right-handed pitchers to give Cowser more at-bats. That's what I hope happens when they head to Boston this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very encouraged by what we've seen from Cowser so far. Looks much more like the prospect we have been watching coming up through the system the past few years. Looks confident, more aggressive in the zone early in counts, making the plays in left field and at Camden Yards when we were playing there against Kansas City. I think he made some really nice plays that Hayes might have made, but they might have been made to look a little more difficult than Cowser did. Yeah, he's firing on all cylinders. And the weird thing about the offense is that these are a bunch of guys that at least last year, and we know guys like Adley, Gunnar, I don't know, Santander was even getting better at being patient, having long at bats, really working the pitcher, drawing the walks. Well, the walk rate's only 6.7% as a team, and they're not really doing that. They're being really aggressive. And they're not striking out that much either. The strikeout rate as a team is only 19.6, which is, I think, lower than last year. But they've hit the ball hard, right at people a lot. You know, a little bit of luck there as well. But I think they need to get back into, and that's what happened when we did score those double-digit runs in the first 2 games of the year. I felt like they were really working the pitchers. Like the first inning of the first game, Sandoval was you let him walk the bases loaded, and then you take advantage. So I think that it's more of an approach thing right now, and I don't know if your approach can go through slumps, but that's what it feels like for the most part is happening right now. I will say Austin Hayes, look, he will be better than he is right now, but he looks like he's aged 5 years since 2023 season ended. He doesn't look as athletic or as strong. Looks like he's pulling a wagon behind him when he's running and hitting everything on the ground. I think he only has 2 hard hit balls or balls over 100 miles per hour all season. I do think he'll be better, but man, the way Cowser's starting out, I'm like, man, I want to see so much more Cowser. Like you said, all these right-handers coming up, he better be in the lineup at least like 50% of the time.
Yeah. I mean, didn't he just have a second kid? So he's got 2 kids. I mean, we got multiple kids.
I've aged probably more than that.
I was going to say, to be fair to Austin there, yeah, if there is one guy that I am frustrated with, it's Austin Hayes. It's just because Cowser has looked so good, but yeah, and you look some of these too, like I'm just nitpicking these stats here, just cherry picking these stats, but like BABIP, Gunnar Henderson's got a 200 BABIP, Westbrook's 208, Mullins is 111, Hayes is 105, Ramon Arias is 067. So like if they're hitting the ball hard, which I want to say I saw a tweet about this earlier today, like the Orioles are hitting the ball hard. They're up there among the league leaders in hard hit rates, and they have one of the lowest BABIPs in the league. So hopefully it's just a little bit of bad luck that's going to turn around. Like I'm looking at my fantasy teams where I just went crazy on elite hitters early in these drafts, and they're not doing well. Like this, it's not just an Orioles problem. A lot of these top hitters just aren't connecting right now. I'll give it some time, but you know, I will say, like I preface there, if we want to get this back to Norfolk and what these guys down there are doing, when I look at this roster, I do. It's Jackson Holiday. We just want to talk about Jackson Holiday for a little bit. Like, he wasn't on the opening day roster. It happened. The season started. The decision was made. You look back and it's justifiable, right? The onslaught of lefties this team is facing. He doesn't have the experience. He didn't play a ton, very much at all, second base late last season. It's obvious he's going to play primarily second base when he comes up. So you want to get him some reps, have the time considerations and all that as well. I'm sure that might be at play for a little bit. Is whatever it is, it's justifiable reasons, I think, to hold him down for a little bit. It's fine. Not going to fight that anymore. But at this point, after watching Holiday these 2 weeks in Norfolk, what's he doing? Let me pull it up here. I jot it down.
I think he's walked 11 times.
Yeah, he's just versus lefties as well. He's only 3 for 7. Again, I feel like we should these next like 2-3 weeks, just caveat at the front. Everything we're talking about a small sample size. We got that. But he's 3 for 7 against lefties with a double, a home run, no walks, no strikeouts. 429 average, 1375 OPS. And we want to make a big deal about his defense. Yeah, the defense didn't look great opening night for Norfolk. You got 1 or 2 workouts at Harbor Park before the season starts. You've been in Sarasota the last couple of months. You're adjusting to colder weather, playing under the lights at a minor league ballpark in the colder temperatures, new field that you got. I know they were there last year, but they're trying to adjust back to Harbor Park. It looked a little iffy opening night and maybe the second night. But like you talk about John Muley's article, pull out this quote right here when there's a lot of great quotes in this article about an opposing scout that was there that watched a lot of these games against Charlotte. He also noted, the scout noted that Holiday didn't put a foot wrong at second base, positing he'd be at least a plus defender there with the potential to play the position well immediately. I agree. Like I'm no scout, I'm no expert. I've watched every inning of this Norfolk Tide season so far, and yeah, I think he's at least 2 throwing errors. I'd say at least one of them, if Kerstad's not playing first base and it's Mountcastle or a more seasoned first baseman, I'll be nice to Kerstad there because he's not going to crap out of the ball. A more seasoned first base gets those picks, I think, on at least one of them, if not both of them that I recall. Not to completely like take all the blame away from Holiday. You got to make the better throw. Like you got to do that first and foremost. He does get some of that blame, but a more seasoned, better first baseman makes some of those picks. Other than that, he's made some diving plays. He's making the routine plays. Like it's very easy to replace somebody like a Tony Kemp or somebody on this roster and put Holiday on there and put him in this lineup, and he will be a major contributor. So that's the only thing that I'm starting to be like, I can be patient. I can wait for this team to start to click. I'm not concerned at all about the long-term outlook of this team, at least this year's concerned. But the Holiday thing, as I'm watching this play out, that is irking me a touch here these last couple of days.
I think he's got to be up by Friday if he's going to still be eligible for the Rookie of the Year draft pick, and that goes for Mayo, Kerstad, all those guys as well. And they'll get, if they come up before then, they'll get their full year backdated as if they were here from opening day. But yeah, I honestly think the big 5 at Norfolk, all of them are just playing their asses off, like playing mad in a good way, like playing with a chip on their shoulder. And if there's anything I can excuse, it's throwing errors early in the season in cold weather after you come up from Sarasota. Like, especially if you want to talk about Kobe Mayo has made some throwing errors. It's been talked about a lot. He's dealing with the new throwing motion, right? So that's got to, give him some time to get adjusted to that as well. Same with Holiday. Kerstad, I'm not sure he's a great first baseman. I think he might be better off right field DH, but the bat plays for sure. But yeah, Holiday, what's he do? He gets on base, and all these concerns about, but how many home runs is he going to hit in the major leagues? Well, kid hit the ball 108 miles per hour on Sunday. He's hitting the ball harder consistently, as you would expect for a 20, 21-year-old as he's maturing, hitting the ball harder. Just got to hit in the air a little bit more, and I think he's doing that as well. So honestly, I think all these guys have a case to come up. Even Norby, I think he has a case as well. The Orioles could use a right-handed bat that could play corner outfield, which I think Norby could provide, and second base as well. So the Orioles have put themselves in this position, though, where they've held on to the veterans. They've held on to the guys like Hayes and Arias, and they are letting these guys get hot, and just they're major leaguers playing at AAA, and it shows. And all of them deserve the shot, and it's just a matter of who's going to be first and when it's going to happen. I hope it starts this week. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a quote here from John's article that I wanted to pull out. And I know sometimes with our listeners, when they read an article that has an anonymous scout quoted in it, they kind of want to toss it aside like that's one person's opinion. Well, people have been doing that kind of writing for years. And John, I think, in this article shows you exactly how you should do it, which is to kind of dig a little bit deeper into things we already know. And the scout quoting here directly, the Charlotte ballpark is a bandbox. Everybody hits well there. Pitchers don't pitch well there, but there's more than that. Chicago's pitching, now as a reminder, the Knights are a AAA affiliate of Chicago White Sox. Chicago's pitching is bad at the big leagues, so AAA is brutal. To put it bluntly, Charlotte is just bad, and Norfolk is just a bunch of guys that are major league ready. That is absolutely true. Norfolk's lineup right now, most of those players are major league ready. Holiday is major league ready. I think Norby and Mayo are major league ready. Kerstad and Stowers have been in the majors already. So that's, I think, where some fans are feeling the frustration right now. As you look at the players who aren't hitting, the ones who are hitting now or aren't hitting into major leagues, and the ones who are hitting at AAA, and you feel like you can easily switch them around. I do agree that if you're going to look at which player can have the biggest impact up front, it's going to be Holiday, because he would take the roster spot that right now belongs to Tony Kemp. And the only thing that Kemp does that Holiday maybe doesn't do that well is stolen bases. But if you're not getting on base, what does that matter?
He's pretty good at coming up with high fives and stuff on the bench and raising team spirit. Yeah.
I mean, I get the Tony Kemp thing. I get having that glue guy, the veteran, whatever it may be, especially early on in the year, like the 26th guy, right? You're not concerned about getting him any at bats. Like if Tony Kemp doesn't play for 4 days in a row, no one's going to notice. People are probably going to be thankful. But if Jackson Holiday's on the roster and he's not playing 2 nights in a row, people are going to freak out and ask why Jackson Holiday isn't playing. Look at Colton Cowser right now. It's like, I get it. It's just, it's frustrating because I know the service time stuff is there. I know that will help, but at the same time, it's just frustrating because there is some dead weight on this major league roster that the Orioles can move on from, and they have guys. And it's not just like, oh, Holiday's a top prospect; he's totally ready. Everyone knows Jackson Holiday is ready, and everyone knows that Jackson Holiday. The defensive talk, I'm so sick and tired of hearing about people talk about Jackson Holiday's defense already. 2 weeks into the year, and we're already at that point. All he needs to do is be an average second baseman right now. That's it, because the bat is going to play. He's batting leadoff for Norfolk, and last week against Chicago, 5 of the 6 games, he led off by getting on base, either via walk or a hit. He's not going to be the leadoff hitter in Baltimore when he comes up, but still, like, that's what he's doing. Yeah, Charlotte wasn't good. I know one of the games was Chad Kuhl was a starter. Like, that's a veteran there, and Holiday got a hit off of him. Yeah, they're not elite pitchers, but still, it's like Zach read off the quote. I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah, you take these numbers with a grain of salt, but these guys are, especially those top 5 guys, they're major league quality bats doing exactly what they need to do. They pounded an inferior opponent into the ground this past week. That's what you want to see these guys do. So yeah, it's just, and you talk about Norby. I feel like we're going to talk about, there's questions about Norby that we're going to get to later on, but I will bring this up. I know Zach noted here on the timeline. I dug a little bit more research on the Norby and the exit velos and how hard he's hitting it. Let's talk about Norby for a second, just add more fuel to this fire of where are you going to play Connor Norby. He's putting up unbelievable numbers as well. He's got 4 home runs to begin the year in 7-8 games. So on the data sheet that we got a hold of last year, Connor Norby had an average exit velo of 86.5 miles per hour. It's not my favorite average exit velo, but it's what we got. Average exit velo of 86.5. His average exit velo right now, up to this point, is 90.7 miles per hour in Norfolk. Now, the 86.5 average exit velo last year and his 90th percentile EV numbers were on par with Terran Vavra. They were like almost identical to Terran Vavra, to give you like a little bit of context on how hard Connor Norby was hitting the ball. Not very. So he's up over 4 miles per hour in average exit velo right now. And his hard hit percentage last year, it was, and that's 95 plus miles per hour batted balls. His hard hit percentage was 30% last year in AAA. He's at 40% right now through the first 2 weeks of the year. So even Norby is knocking the crap out of the ball, trying to prove it.
And we know that he had some minor swing adjustments. I think that was another Mioli article or somewhere that he's made some kind of swing adjustment. I don't know if it's major or minor, but hey, seems to be paying off in some serious ways so far. And another one of my favorite quotes from that article is that Heston Kjerstad is taking some of the most comfortable at bats that this scout has ever seen in his entire life, which, yeah, it does make sense. He's just crushing the ball. I'm calling him the barrel king from now on. Like he doesn't have the elite exit velocities of a Kobe Mayo, but he hits the ball at the right angle and he hits it hard enough and ball goes flying.
Yeah. And I'll say this too about all these guys. Excuse me. It's fun to sit here and, be upset that these guys aren't in the major leagues. It makes for good content. What else are we going to talk about right now? It's early on in the year, but at the same time, to go back to my first point of how like I'm not worried about this team, this does add to that lack of worry for me. It's like it is still very early on in the year, and I don't buy this thing that like wins in August or July mean more than wins in April, because wins right now, like that game Sunday against Pittsburgh, you should have won that game. There's no excuse to lose that game against Pittsburgh.
We win it last year with Felix. Point
exactly.
blank.
And what if this division comes down to one game? You look back, well, this was your one game that you should have won. So like every game is just important as the next. But it is so early on still. This team has reinforcement after reinforcement after reinforcement prepared to go so they can move on from this dead weight. And if Austin Hayes doesn't ever pull through, like he's got an option. They could send him down to Norfolk if they need to. They can make a move there. They can make a move for Ramon Arias. And they have an adequate or better replacement, certainly guys with much higher ceilings ready to replace them. Or if this team needs to make a trade and they want to make a big deal, they've got plenty of guys still to pull off a big trade. So I think on the reverse side of that, I am still confident of where this team is headed. And I know that the guys that deserve to be in the major leagues, they're going to be up there soon enough. It is just frustrating to watch Ramon Arias and Austin Hayes play like they have and say, and then we turn on MILB TV and I'm watching Norfolk and it's like, it's the first inning. Norfolk's already up 6-0 and Heston Kjerstad has 2 home runs. It's like, come on.
Well, and let's not forget, it was about this time last year that the Orioles optioned Cole Irvin to AAA because he was off to a slow start. So if people don't think that Mike Elias is unwilling to make that kind of move, it's wrong, because there is precedence for it. And the Orioles' expectations going into last season were much lower than they were going into this season. So I do think there's going to be urgency when the timing is right. And that brings me really to the final point that I have for this segment, which is the Orioles are now heading to Boston to start this week off. The Red Sox, particularly their pitching staff, outperforming expectations by quite a bit right now. Then they're going to have Milwaukee when they come home. Norfolk, meanwhile, is going back to Harbor Park to play Scranton Wilkes-Barre this week. What's going to happen, and what are we going to be talking about next Monday?
Hopefully not that DL Hall just pitched a quality start against the Orioles at Camden Yards and
not
Joey
with
Ortiz.
his 51 stuff plus fastball. I don't think so.
No, the fan in me, like that's what we are first and foremost. We're Orioles fans. We want to see the best product on the field, but obviously you always don't send your best 26 guys on the roster. I don't think a move gets made this week in Boston. I think we're going to roll with what we got, and hopefully we see at least one of these guys, Austin Hayes or Ramon Arias, one of these guys steps up. Santander starts picking it up a little bit as well. He has 2 home runs, but he's also hitting barely 200. I think the bats start to pick it up a little bit this week. Maybe it was a wake-up call. The pitching has been, I was going to say great. Parts of it have been great. They've got the Orioles rank 5th in ERA, 5th in FIP, I think 5th in FWAR when I was looking earlier. Like this staff as a whole, that includes bullpen and starters. The staff as a whole, yeah, there are certain guys not performing up to expectations.
Mike Bauman.
We'll talk about him later on, don't worry. But there's like this pitching staff is performing pretty well overall. I have a lot of confidence that even if a move is not made, that the bats pick it up, and it's Boston. Let's take it to them. These games are always so much fun. It's their home opening day. Like, let's ruin a Tuesday up there in Boston, some of these fans, and get the wheels back on track here.
I would love to see Kobe Mayo pepper that green monster this week, but we might have to wait till the next time we're in Boston. I really think there's also no reason Heston Kjerstad should not be up here right now as well. I would say even Kjerstad for Kemp in the meantime, and if they're going to keep waiting on Holiday, makes a lot of sense because he hits lefties as well as he hits righties. He can hit for power to all fields. I think he would be a great addition. I don't know. I think we're probably talking about when are the Orioles going to bring someone up this time next week. But hopefully it's coming off of a better week than a 3 for 3. 3-3.
Absolutely. And in our next episode, we're going to break down the opening weekends for the Bowie Bay Sox, Aberdeen Ironbirds, and Delmarva Shorebirds. You're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels. We're over at Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. And while you're browsing the internet, be sure to become a patron if you're not one already, or subscribe to our Substack where you can get articles from Bob, Nick, and I throughout the season. We also have our Discord community, which is very active, and I encourage you to join that as well. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And for the first time since last fall, we can break down the 4 full season levels of the minor leagues. Now, we talked about the Norfolk Tides in our last episode. So in this episode, we're going to focus on the Orioles' 3 other full season affiliates, Bowie, Aberdeen, and Delmarva. All 3 clubs got their season started over the weekend, and we're going to break that down a little bit in this episode. And I will start here with Bowie. The Bay Sox dropped their opener against Reading at Prince George's Stadium on Friday by a final of 5-2, but then the offense woke up in a big way on Saturday as they defeated Reading 19-1. They followed it up with a 4-3 win on Sunday to clinch the series victory. And we're going to get into some of the standout performances, but Bob, I'll start off with you here. Focusing on the Bay Sox, we saw kind of a close game, some back and forth on Friday that ended in a loss for them. But then on Saturday, they had what could go down as one of the biggest wins of the year by any Orioles affiliate. What are your thoughts on the way the Bay Sox look so far?
I think they look great. And this is without even Samuel Basayo having an extra base hit, even though he's played pretty well. He's hitting the ball hard. He hasn't struck out much. The big names haven't really got going, especially on offense, but the pitching staff seems to be as advertised, I would say. And the hitting is on its way. Ben Cosme is holding his own. I'd love to see him start in Double-A and get off to a good start. Dylan Beavers looks pretty comfortable. We could just list the names, but I mean, I just think it's a really solid squad, and that probably helps a little bit that AAA is so loaded that these guys, like even Billy Cook, stays in Double-A, not because he's not warranted to be up in AAA. It's because there's really no room for him right now. So he's going to have to repeat Double-A despite performing really well there. I think Bowie's going to be a lot of fun to follow all year round. And yeah, I like to see him get off to a good start because, if nothing else, they have great outfield defense between Beavers, Fabian, Dante Williams, John Rhodes out there. So pitchers got to love the defense behind them.
Yeah, Bowie was just like, I think I mentioned this on the daily I did on Sunday. It's like when those guys in Norfolk get promoted or traded or moved or whatever, the guys in Bowie are going to step up, and Norfolk's still going to be putting up 15 runs a game at this rate. Judd Fabian, it was good to see that he rolled his ankle opening night and was back in the lineup on Saturday. And I think that's when he hit his home run, is his 1 hit in 2 games. Of course, it's a home run because that's what Judd Fabian does. He's got a 167 average, but a 953 OPS. Gotta love it. For me, on the hitting side of things, Ben Cosme stood out to me the most. He had Saturday, he was 3 for 3 with 2 walks, 2 RBIs and a stolen base. He was perfect on Saturday. He had a hit on his very first game of the year, and then I think he went hitless. Yeah, he was 0 for 4 on Sunday. But still, overall, Ben Cosme is off to a pretty hot start. What is that? 4 hits and 11 at-bats, 2 walks to just 1 strikeout in his 3 games played. And I know there was some you guys were talking in the Patreon chat about the defense looking pretty good over at shortstop. That's a positive as well. I just think Ben Cosme, this is a guy that the organization is pushed, I think, on like social media channels in the offseason. He's a guy who they pushed through the organization literally. He had 2 days in the FCL before he went to Delmarva. He's up in Bowie now. And how old is he? Is he only 21 still? Yeah. 21. He just turned 21 in December. Christmas baby. That's right. So yeah, I think this organization is pretty high on Ben Cosme. I'm not just saying this because he was just on the show, but I think he's unique. He's not in that same tier as Enrique Bradfield Jr. is, but he does provide a unique look as a hitting prospect in this organization. Last year, I think we talked a lot about if Ben Cosme, he's going to fill out, he's going to get older, he's going to get stronger. Do we start to see more power from him? And he hit 2 home runs last year. I don't honestly at this point, I don't care if the power ever shows up. I don't think he needs it. I think he's not going to ever challenge Gunnar or Jackson Holliday or Westberg or any infielder to be a starting infielder, I think, for the Baltimore Orioles. But I do think he can carve out some sort of role in the big leagues as a utility type player who makes good contact, does not strike out, and steals bases. So I like that. And then for me, it's the pitching as well. Zach Peak and Kyle Branovich, just beautiful 2 outings from them. And I jotted down, how old are they? Branovich is 26 and Peak is 25.
Man, I thought they were 40 by now.
They should be. I think my only note with them is it's 1 start or 1 outing in Peak's case. They were good. A lot of strikeouts, very little to no walks. They each allowed 1 earned run, I think, in each of their outings. I think this is great because these guys don't have any tread on their arm. They are 26 and 25 years old and they're in AA. So I think a lot of people would look at that and be like, okay. And just like poo-poo that. That's a mistake because both these guys were drafted in 2019 by the Angels.
They didn't even pitch.
Yeah. They didn't pitch that year. They didn't pitch in 2020 because of the pandemic. They each had a full year in 2021, which Branovich ended in Bowie and Peak ended in high A. Both pitched very well. Then they have surgery at Tommy John in 2022, so missed virtually all of 2022 and 2023. So this is really their second full years of pro ball. And Branovich is throwing 95, 96 now with more pitches in his tool belt. That's huge. Again, it's just 1 outing, so I'm not, I forget what I was going to say, but it's just 1 outing. But I am very intrigued and very pleasantly surprised that they are off to this hot of a start in Bowie.
Yeah, my favorite thing that's come out of this minor league season, I think, the first weekend is that Branovich is all of a sudden throwing 3-4 miles per hour faster and added 2 legitimate out pitches to his repertoire. And he was already a guy that we thought could be a back end starter, decent bullpen arm. Well, if he's going to be throwing this hard and he's added weapons, then my man has a shot here. So I love to see that. And I hope it continues throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to see both of them back on the mound being really effective. And in that same vein, got to shout out Trey Miguel, who had a really nice outing on Saturday. 2 innings, faced a minimum, struck out 3, no walks. And now as a reminder, Miguel was a Rule 5 pick out of the Pirates system, the minor league phase, before last season. He missed most of the season because he had Tommy John surgery early in the 2022 campaign. He looked good in a small taste when he got back on the mound last year. But this has the potential to be his first full season since 2021. So Miguel, Branovich, and Peak kind of in similar positions right now in Bowie. And I feel like with the starts that they're getting off to, they're guys that we could see at AAA at some point. And going back to Ben Cosme for a moment, I think this is absolutely a situation where the Orioles knew that the stat line at Aberdeen did not meet what they had from their data. We've seen this before. You go back to Connor Norby in 2022. Norby didn't hit particularly well at Aberdeen, but he went to Bowie and lit the world on fire before getting promoted to Norfolk. Ben Cosme off to an excellent start at Bowie, and I agree with Nick. I don't think he really needs to develop for that much power. He's going to be a utility infielder with an excellent eye at the plate, great walk to strikeout numbers, going to hit for a high average. If he hits 10 to 12 home runs in his best seasons, you take that as a win. We'll move on now to Aberdeen. They had kind of a tough weekend, losing back-to-back games by 1 run before getting the win on Sunday. And Sunday's game hit on a big theme for the Ironbirds over the weekend, which was that a lot of the pitchers that the Orioles drafted last year who did not pitch after the draft made their debuts over the weekend. And on Sunday, it was Jackson Baumeister who pitched his way out of a couple of jams against Jersey Shore to put together a pretty good final line. He goes 3 shutout innings, striking out 5 against 2 walks with 3 hits. Carter Ballmer comes in behind him to get the win in relief with 2 innings with 1 unearned run allowed. Davey Cruz 2 scoreless innings to back him up. So it was a good day for Aberdeen's pitching staff to pull off the lone win of the series on Sunday. Meanwhile, the offense scores 4 runs. Creed Willems, who was off to a fantastic start, went 2 for 3 in this game. And Bob, I know that we talked about this a little before we went on air. Willems is really hitting well right now. Do you think that he's kind of in the same position that he was at Delmarva last year, where after struggling over the course of more than half a season at Aberdeen last year, he's quickly making adjustments to the level and just overmatching pitchers?
It's very early. I think he's played in 2 games, but sure seems like he's doing that thing again where he struggles mightily, takes a couple months off, comes back and dominates the level. I mean, obviously we'll see, but to get off to the start that he did, 3 for 6, a home run, 2 walks. I think maybe this is the routine he's going to settle into. Let's see if he gets up to Double-A at some point this year and struggles, then I'm going to expect him to come out and mash in 2025 in Double-A. Love to see it, though. Catchers develop slower. We know that. And he's a big kid with a lot of power and a lot of potential. And I think he's just going to keep reminding us of that throughout his career here. And I think I would love to hear Nick talk about Jackson Ballmeister's debut, though, if we could, because I thought he put it really nicely in the Discord. Join it if you haven't already. What do you say, Nick?
First of all, I will say Creed Willems is going to be 21 years old real quick, and in Bowie by the end of the year. So I think I will make that statement now. And I'm not even a big Creed guy, to be honest. But hopefully this trend continues. I really liked watching Levi Wells and Jackson Ballmeister this weekend. I was pumped. I did not think Ballmeister was going to start in high A. Bob, you had it in your preseason roster prediction article, and I was like, I just don't see it. It's pitching. We don't know how this organization is going to treat bigger pitching prospects because we've never really drafted those types of pitching prospects. Ballmeister looked really good, I thought. Let me pull up his numbers here if I have the Ballmeister numbers. Yeah, he didn't have the most crisp command and control, I think, but this was his first career start. But it's in high A, so I give them a bit of a pass on the less than stellar control command issues that they had since just one start. But Ballmeister, when he was hitting his spots, the fastball, I think a couple of times on the broadcast, they mentioned like 93, 94. I think that's on par with what he was throwing in college. But it looks like it plays at like 98, 99 miles per hour, to be honest, especially up in the zone. The curveball, that was an offering that really stood out to me. When that was on, he was able to flip that thing in there with like with 2 strikes on a guy. And like weird noises came out of my body a couple of times as I watched him pitch. For their first career outing, I thought it was great. Levi Wells even as well. I know, again, I'll mention it again. I know a lot of people know this by now, but he was one of the guys in Jeff Pont's article. He tagged him and Teddy Sharkey, who unfortunately didn't pitch this weekend, but as 2 guys who could reach the MLB level this year from last year's draft class. I don't think the Orioles do that because I think they're going to continue to work Levi Wells as a starter. But when you watched him pitch, was that Saturday, you definitely see why Jeff would like tag him as one of those pitchers, because the fastball, when he was locating it, he was pounding the fastball. And then same thing, the curveball may have not have been like visually pretty as Ballmeister's, but he was getting hitters to chase on the curveball with 2 strikes. He only walked 1 guy despite getting into a lot of deep counts. Like I give both these guys solid Bs on their debut. They were worth the wait. I think both of them, Levi Wells and Jackson Ballmeister. You got 2, at least Ballmeister's probably because he was a 3rd round pick last year. I think that's right. Obviously he's the guy that's going to be under the microscope this year. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about Ballmeister and seeing how high he could get to this year. Could he get to Double-A by the end of the year? I don't know.
I felt like Ballmeister got better as he went along in Sunday's outing, and I agree with you, Nick, that the fastball seemed like it was playing up from the actual velocity. And early on, I'm not reading too much into velocity. I expected the fastball is going to be down a tick or 2 in the beginning phases of the year, especially for a player that's coming north to begin their season. This is a myriad of factors. But Ballmeister's fastball sitting 93, 94 in that outing and seemingly playing higher was really encouraging to me. And I thought that Wells probably pitched better than what the final line indicated in his start on Saturday. So 2 really good debuts there. And speaking of good pitching, if you looked at the Delmarva Shorebirds' final scores over the weekend, you would get a vastly different impression of what actually happened in these games. The Shorebirds dropped all 3 contests at Fredericksburg. They lost Friday's opener 4-2, but then were defeated 11-4 on Saturday and then 10-4 on Sunday. What you would lose in the nuance, though, of looking at those final scores is that their starting pitching looks really, really good right now. And that's thanks to Jacob Cravey, Blake Money, and Luis De Leon coming out with really good season debuts. Cravey got things started on Friday before Money came in with a good start on Saturday, and then De Leon looked very good on Sunday. And I'll just start with De Leon here because if there's a prospect at the lower levels that I think was incorrectly held back, it's De Leon. I don't think he has much left to prove at Delmarva after the way he pitched last year. And the only reason I can think that he's there is that you do have a little bit of a logjam right now at the upper levels. It's going to mean someone has to start a level lower than they otherwise would. He doesn't have a lot of experience. And if you want to quibble a little bit, the walk totals could get better. In his first outing, he comes out 4 innings, 1 earned run allowed, 2 runs total, 2 hits, 5 strikeouts, and this is the key thing, 0 walks. And the stuff looked like it did last year. Fastball, good velocity on it. The changeup and the slider looked good as well. So De Leon, to me, I just don't think he belongs at Delmarva anymore. And I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, he looked electric to me from what I saw of his start. And I think it's fine that he's starting there, but hopefully they don't keep him down too long. And again, I'm glad for guys like Edgar Portes, Davy Cruz, Juan De Los Santos. They all pitched well opening weekend. Moises Chase hasn't pitched yet, but happy for them that they're starting in Aberdeen because I thought they'd be stuck in Delmarva again. But yeah, Luis De Leon's got to join them soon. And I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe Cameron Weston moving up to AA, someone like that. But yeah, Luis De Leon looks amazing. And Alex Pham, I mean, Blake Money, he looks pretty incredible too. A guy who was like a late relief pick in last year's draft. And all of a sudden he's starting the game and we're like, interesting. Then he comes out and strikes out 7 in 4 innings and looks great doing so. So the Orioles continue to pull rabbits out of their hat. And I'm glad Blake Money, because it's an incredible name, is the latest to join that list.
It's useless unless we draft his brother, who is a catcher, apparently, Cash Money. So we got to complete this this duo here. Yeah, it's the pitching in Delmarva. I mean, Jared Beck and Brainer Sanchez gave out combined 9 runs in like 1 total innings pitched. That skews things. Michael Ferret made his pro debut as well. He was a later round draft pick. That's a deep project pick. He gave up 6 runs in his 3 innings of work. Honestly, though, I did not watch him pitch in that game, so can't really speak too much about him. But I did watch Money and De Leon and Cravey, and man, all 3 of them looked really good. Cravey, you can see why this guy is a tank, like 6'6". I don't know how much he weighs. It's a lot. That is a powerful arm up there. Luis De Leon, though, he only has like 30, 40 innings in Delmarva last year. So I get it as well. I think he could hold his own, more than hold his own in high A right now, but I guess it is a good sign though, at least that like Juan De Los Santos is in high A because he had like more than 100 innings, I think, in Delmarva. Davy Cruz is in high A. I think he exceeded 100 innings in Delmarva already. So I guess get those guys up to high A, see if they can cut it or not. But Luis De Leon won't be far behind him. I mean, he's 20 years old, just 20 years old, and he throws harder than Cade Povich. Or he's at least right in line with Cade Povich in terms of fastball velo. I think Povich was like 93 to 94, topping out at this weekend, or in his 2 starts this week against Charlotte. Luis De Leon, we know, can pump 94, 95, 96. The changeup is a work of art already. I think that's the one thing that's been highlighted about him is that he is 18 years old with like mastering the changeup already, which you don't see a lot of 18-year-olds like in the Dominican Summer League throwing quality changeups. De Leon was. Yeah, that was really promising. The rest of the lineup, I mean, it was a lot of these guys' debuts. Anderson De Los Santos looked really good for this lineup, like really good. I pounded that table all off season, and I'm not going to stop because he looked great in those first 2 games. But the pitching, man, we said it, the year of the pitcher. Just keep saying it. Just get it tattooed because it's happening this year.
Yeah, seriously. I was going to actually throw that to you at one point, but I forgot. Um, we will keep banging that table. I love that phrase all season about the year of the pitcher. I watched a lot of Delmarva this weekend. I don't know why I'm drawn to watching, first of all, the pitching, obviously, but these young hitters. And I enjoyed, even though Braylon Tavares started 0 for 10 with 2 walks. Leandro Arias started 1 for 11 with 2 walks. I just like the presence that those guys showed at the plate. You can see they're ball players. I think they'll be fine. Like you said, Anderson De Los Santos off to a fantastic start. 3 for 7, a double, a triple, a walk, striking out less. And again, very short sample size. Thomas Sosa, 3 for 11 with a double and a walk. I like seeing Aaron Estrada get in the lineup in left field. He had a double with 3 RBIs in Sunday's game. Yeah, I just think it's a lot of fun to watch these young international guys, and my guy Jake Cunningham is there too, so that doesn't hurt.
Well, we're going to dive a little bit into the hitters here and the pitchers in our final segment, and this is something we love to do every episode in season, which is shout out players who finish outside of our top 30 prospect ranking for something they've done, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or maybe there's just something interesting in their stat line that we want to point out. And I'm going to start with Nick here because he has a hitter on Delmarva that I know he's pretty high on, and I think the 3 of us are pretty high on as well.
Sorry. Yeah, my hitter is Anutis Mordon. Sticking with Delmarva there. He went 4 for 8 this weekend with a double and a home run, 3 walks to just 1 strikeout. And I think I posted the home run clip on Twitter and someone like responded. It was like, there's another one, like another catcher in this organization. I like, there might be. Like, that's why I took him in our minor league draft or locked on before the season started. There are probably 5 or 6, at least, maybe more, catchers in the system who are probably better defenders than Mordon, but the kid hits. He hit a lot last year in the FCL, and he's starting this year by hitting and taking walks. It's the crazy thing to me with Mordon, he wasn't on my radar, at least until last year when he started hitting the FCL, but this is his 4th year of pro ball, and he's still just 19 years old. And his numbers in 2 years in the DSL were not good at all. He had a 581 OPS and a 555 OPS in 2 years in the DSL. But then he goes to the FCL and he put up an 894 OPS with 7 home runs. And he was 4 for 11 with a double and a home run last year in like 3 or 4 games with Delmarva. So shout out to Mordon for his hot start. And my pitcher, you guys touched on him, was Blake Money. I mean, I did not have Blake Money being used as a starter on the minor league bingo card this year. But like I said, when I did the daily recaps over the weekend, like it's not him coming out of nowhere though. Like he was a starter at LSU 2 years ago. Some kid from Air Force, like Skeens or somebody, transferred into LSU and bumped him out of the rotation. Like, okay. But I thought the Blake Money and Riley Cooper picks were just kind of like both LSU bullpen arms. I just thought they were kind of like the low ceiling, high floor relief picks that we've seen a lot of in years past. But maybe Money is more than that because you strike out 7 guys, you give up 1 run on 2 hits in your debut this year. The velo, I think he was throwing in the mid 90s. I think the broadcast had him at like 94 a couple of times. He threw a lot of strikes, and the list grows for intriguing pitchers that I think we need to pay attention to this year.
Yeah, for me, I went with Zach Peak as my pitcher. I'll stick with pitching for now. I just thought this was awesome. Zach Peak's first performance of the year, first outing of the year, and starts out a little shaky. I think he let a couple runners on, but ends up, I think he got out the last 8 guys he faced, something like that. But he had 7 strikeouts in 3 innings, giving up 2 hits and a walk, and he was electric. I wouldn't expect him to be at AA too long if he continues to perform like this in AA, picking up right where he left off from 2022 before he went down with the injury. And for my hitter, I'm going with Anthony Servideo, who last year it seemed like, he was going to be that organizational filler guy, just bouncing around where it was needed, played a lot at AA, not because it was warranted really based on performance, but because they had a need to fill. And he actually, the longer he was there, the harder he worked. He started fitting in a little bit better as the year went on. And I think now he does belong at AA, and he's off to a pretty solid start. 2 for 8 with 4 runs, a double, an RBI, 3 walks, and a stolen base. And we know he can play really good defense up the middle. So just wanted to shout out Servideo, who, maybe he's got a chance to get back in the good graces of our prospect list this year.
I'm going to go with another infielder from Bowie for my shout out here, and that is Colin Burns, who was excellent in the Bay Sox 19-1 win on Saturday, going 3 for 4 with 7 RBIs and falling just a double short of the cycle. Burns' season last year was really limited by injuries. He only appeared in 44 games across 4 levels. So this is the first chance that he's had since 2022, where he's got an extended opportunity to prove himself. And so far, coming out of the gate, looks very good. And now, as a reminder, Burns, if you want to go back a little ways, was the Orioles' 6th-round pick out of Tulane in the 2021 draft, an infielder who can move around a little bit. And so far, the bat looks really good at Bowie, still just 23 years old. Curious to see what he does for the rest of the way. And then for my pitcher, I went with Jacob Cravey. His stuff looked great in Delmarva's opener on Friday. I know that Fredericksburg's gun on MILB TV was a little cold. So if you watch one of those games and you saw someone hitting 87, 88, that was not true. They were probably more like low to mid 90s. And that was certainly the case for Cravey in that start. His secondaries looked really good as well. And the final line in that outing was great for him because he comes out of that with 4 innings pitched, giving up just 1 hit with 5 strikeouts against 2 walks, no runs allowed. So far, things look good for him. He definitely looks like he has a starter's mix with his pitches. We'll have to see how things play out, but 22 years old, 6th-round pick last year out of Samford in Alabama, listed at 6'6", 215. So big mound presence there, and his stuff looks great. And with that does it for this segment. We're going to be back later this week to answer your questions related to the majors and the minors in a mailbag episode. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to subscribe to our Patreon feed if you haven't already, or subscribe to our Substack, where Bob, Nick, and I will be contributing articles throughout the season. Orioles on the Verge, part of the Bleed Podcast Network. For Zach Spedden, this is Bob Phelan and for Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge.
Yeah,
doing this 2-3 times a night.
Yeah,
yeah.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. Oh. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to take questions from our listeners. We're going to cover the majors and the minors in this special mailbag episode. And with that, I'm going to dive right into this question from Ben. When does John Means return? And who is off the rotation and roster when he returns? I'm going to start with Bob.
Well, I just happen to have my globe here that tells the future. I think, he'll be back within 30 days of his rehab starts. So by the end of April, he'll be back. I would imagine he takes Cole Irvin's spot in the rotation. And I would imagine that I would keep Cole Irvin around. He's out of options. I think he can be really solid as a multi-inning reliever, long man, if you need someone, if the starter can't give you too much length, which leaves Jonathan Heasley and Mike Baumann as the options to kick to the curb here. And Heasley has the option. Baumann doesn't. I know Baumann has struggled mightily to start this year, but I think if Heasley's not replaced before Means comes around town, then I would say Baumann, but the easy answer is Jonathan Heasley.
Well, my first question was Ciano Perez. When is he coming back first? And would that be before John Means, which Hopefully, it's before John Means comes back, but I imagine it's around the same time. So yeah, I said assuming Perez is back first and off the IL, Heasley goes down, and then Means comes back. Either way, doesn't matter who comes back first or second. Heasley goes down because he has the option. And then you're looking at guys who don't have options and some guys who do have options that I'm sure some fans would like to see just go down to Norfolk so they don't have to deal with them anymore. But they're pitching very well. So this is when I think when it does get tough, I agree. I think Irvin doesn't have the option. So you can't send him down to Norfolk. He's not going to get through waivers, obviously. So if Heasley's down, Means comes back. I know Aiken has the option, but he had a great spring.
He looks really good. I hate to say
it. I know. I kept telling you. I said it 3-4 times in a row. You look at the numbers last year when he was healthy, they were actually really, really good and trending in the right direction from the year before, even when he was okay. Like, you got to keep Aiken. I think it's Bauman. Like, I think it's got to be. Aiken had a great spring. He's off to a strong start this year. I think you can move on from Michael Bauman, to be honest. And it's tough. And I'm not just saying this because he just had that meltdown. Like, who else is it going to be? I mean, Bauman's going to be 29 years old this year. He's not a young prospect anymore. He's not going to slip through waivers, but I do think he is replaceable. Like, Albert Suarez looked really good. He had 6 shutout innings the other day. You can bring up Albert Suarez. He's got swing and miss stuff to bring in this bullpen. You can make a trade. You can find another guy off waivers. You can make a small time trade to get another guy to bring in. Like, you can replace Michael Bauman. I feel like his production. Like,
is Brian Baker really that much worse? I mean, I know we don't want Brian Baker back in the bullpen, but he's got an option. Is he that much worse than Michael Bauman? Wanderson Charles is there. Keegan Gillis comes in with the bases loaded in Double-A Bowie and strikes out 3 in a row. Like, there's options.
Yeah, I agree. So sorry, Mike, but love that no hitter in Bowie. We'll always have that, but it's just he's not a young guy anymore. He's getting old. He's about to be 30 soon. Like, I think he is who he is. He can be. There's a role for him somewhere in the majors, but I think his time is about up here in Baltimore.
Yeah, I agree. I think that CNL Perez's timeline is important to keep in mind because I think Bauman will get a little bit of a leash because he doesn't have options and because there were times last year he was really effective. So Heasley, I feel bad for Heasley because I almost feel like he's in that spot where no matter how well he pitches in the next week or two, he's going to go down because he has options left. Now, the good news is we could see him back. So I would say for right now that in some order, Perez comes back. He goes back into the bullpen. Means rejoins the rotation. Irvin goes to the bullpen. And then at that point, I think Bauman becomes vulnerable. I'll point this out with Bauman. I was watching Saturday's game, and the one thing that really jumped out at me was that he really did not seem to be trusting his fastball at all. There were a lot of spots that I thought he could have thrown that pitch in that he didn't. And the at-bat that I look at is Edward Olivares is up. And here's your pitch sequence. Knuckle curveball, slider, knuckle curve, slider, knuckle curve. He ends up walking him. And at that point, the tying run comes in. Bauman did not throw a single fastball in that at-bat. And that's just not something I'm used to seeing from him. And it is a little bit alarming. I hope that over the next couple of weeks he can figure it out. But right now, something just seems off with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the guy that can throw 98 miles per hour. He's got to go to that unless he just does not trust it to command it whatsoever. Well, he wasn't really commanding the other pitches either. So, yeah, that was tough to see. But here's a question from, I don't know how to pronounce this. I love to know how to pronounce it. Is this a name? Is it a nickname? Does anyone have any helpful hints?
EOJ Esmata. That's
yeah. Oh yeah, that could be it. EOJ, a great commenter, great patron in the Discord group. I've read it all the time. I just have never said it out loud until this second. EOJ Esmata says, is it possible that we see Connor Norby be the first call up with Jackson and Kobe not looking quite comfortable defensively just yet? Does Norby's steadiness give him a small advantage? Injuries withstanding, of course. Start with Zach.
There is a little bit of advantage that Norby has, and that's experience. He was at AAA to end the 2022 season. He was there all of last year, and I've made the argument repeatedly on this show that I think if you look across the board, his 2023 season was better than his 2022 season, which says a lot because he was great in 2022. What I'm curious to see is how high of a bar are the Orioles setting for his right field defense? Because if that bar is kind of high, then I could see him down in Norfolk for a little while. But if they're just putting him in right field so they can give Jackson Holiday as many innings at second base as possible, but they really don't plan to play him much there in the majors, then I think it is possible you could see Norby ahead of one of those two guys because of the experience level and because of the fact that right now second base is not a position where the Orioles are getting a lot of production. So right-handed hitter, has a lot of time at AAA, could fill a real need for you. So I still feel like Mayo or Holiday get there first, just based on the Orioles' habits, where if they introduce a new position with a player, they're going to want that player to play out there for a while. And in Norby's case, that's right field. But if they're not really too concerned about his defense out there, then I think it's possible you could see him in the majors before one of those other two players.
It's tough, and it's so fresh. I know it's frustrating to think about on our end, and it's frustrating for fans who watch him play in Norfolk for the last 2 years and ask where does he fit in. But so I know it's got to be extremely frustrating for him. I mean, he's let those frustrations come out publicly even last year, but I just don't see it. And I think that is a good point that Zach just brought up, and it is a good question that I have. Is he playing? Because he's played like all but 1 or 2 games. He's played pretty much every game in Norfolk in either left or right field. So is it because they're making sure Holiday can play second base every night? And then you've got guys like Errol Robinson and Nick Maton filling out the rest of the infield. But is it because they want Holiday at second base every night? Or is it because, hey, you've got a chance to come up to the big leagues, but show us you can play in the outfield? I don't know. I'm going to assume that it's we need to give Jackson Holiday as much run at second base as possible because he's coming up. So I think Norby, a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot of people, I think there are some people who don't realize just how good of a prospect he is because he gets overshadowed so much. The kid is legit. And I don't think we've ever said anything like negative about Connor Norby's play. Like he's not that good of a prospect. We're all huge fans of Norby. This hitterish prospect coming out of the draft is a power hitter as well, which I did not see coming when they drafted him out of ECU. It is frustrating. And part of me is just like, I don't just want to just trade him because he's completely blocked. But at the same time, I do think he is completely blocked because Holiday's going to come up. He has to come up soon. Mayo could force the issue at some point this year. Like, are you going to bring up Connor Norby as the 26th man to replace Tony Kemp? But is this organization going to be comfortable with giving a rookie sparing at bats in the major leagues? I don't know. I don't think they would be. So I just think he is completely, if there is a path for him, I don't see it. If someone else sees it, I'd love to hear like what that path could be, but I just don't see any path. Like there's blocked and then there's Connor Norby. Like he is on a whole nother level of being completely blocked from this roster, I think.
Yeah, it is super tough. Like I want to try to figure out a way. And then it's like, well, wouldn't you just bring up Chrisette or wouldn't you just bring up Mayo or Holiday or even Stowers at this point? But I guess short term, like could he come up and be a temporary placeholder against if we have another string of lefties coming up? He's a guy that you could treat like Taron Vavra when he was brought up. Like you don't need to play him every day. Like if you bring up these other guys, Kerstad, Mayo, Holiday, like would you be comfortable starting him in right field / second base / DH against lefties just to give that boost against lefties after if they continue to struggle like this against them? But that's like the only way I could see it, unfortunately. Or injuries, injuries would be one way for sure he could finally get a chance, and he does deserve a chance. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. And I thought about that too. You could bring him up as like a bridge option or get him some run now if you want him to. But would the organization send him back down? Like, what if he hits? What if he does play really well? Like, how can you send him back down? And then you can't have Holiday and Norby. And Mayo's going to force his way. Mayo is over here. Baseball America just said this kid's putting up legitimate 80 grade power display down in Norfolk right now. He's hitting the ball so hard and at such good launch angles. I don't care about the defense right now. That bat has got to find a way to the major leagues at some point this year. It's you want to say it'll all play out, which it normally does, but in this situation, I do think it is kind of it's more difficult. But we'll see how the next couple weeks play out, I guess. We'll go to the next question here from AFED, and all these come from our Discord. How have Mayo and Holiday looked defensively so far? Looking solely at box scores, it seems the errors in the first few days have slowed. But how have they been getting many chances in the field? Do they look comfortable on their routine plays? Any athletic web gems? I kind of said my piece on both these guys, especially Holiday. What have you guys seen from them this season so far?
Honestly, yeah, there's been some issues, especially that first weekend really was a lot of errors, mostly throwing. I've honestly seen Kobe Mayo. Obviously, he's not throwing the ball the way I'm sure he would want to right now, but I've seen him make some pretty good plays, charging in, made some athletic plays. Like, I'm still not worried about it. I think he's going to be an average third baseman, at least long term, and probably this year. Not a worry for me. And obviously, it was spring training fluff, but I don't think guys are like I forget the third base coach for the Orioles and the infield coordinator, but I don't think he's blowing smoke when he was saying that stuff. So I think Mayo will be fine. And like you said, that bat, oh my God, he's hitting 112. Like, he's just crushing baseballs right now. And it's funny, he probably has like one of the lowest OPSs out of that top five, at least, but he's still playing incredible. And Holiday, I think he looks perfectly fine at second base. Honestly, I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise. I know one of the errors that he was involved with was like a perfect soft throw to Kjerstad, and he just flat dropped it. So defensively, I think they're making the routine. I think they're making better than routine plays. You just got to make the throws a bit more accurate.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that anything we've seen from them so far is any more than early season jitters. And to go to your point, Bob, what Tony Manzolino said about Mayo in spring training spoke volumes to me, because if the throwing motion was an issue, and it sounds like the Orioles did think it was an issue for Mayo, he's done a lot to rectify that since the end of last season. And that progress matters a lot more than a defensive slump at the beginning of the year. So give it a little bit of time. I think things are going to even out and he's going to be fine. The same with Holiday at second base. Now, I do think the adjustment curve with Holiday is going to be a little bit different because he doesn't have as much time at second base as Mayo has at third. But we're talking about someone who last year played what I think could be described at worst as a capable shortstop, and most nights a very good shortstop. So if he can do that over the course of a full season, he's going to make an easy adjustment to second base. So both of them may be off to a little bit of a rocky start defensively, but I'm not worried about it at all long term.
Yeah. I think one of Mayo's errors, he slipped. Like, he just slipped on the dirt a little bit. That was like opening night. I think he did have that one play, like Bob mentioned, that he came charging in on it, made a great throw over at first base. Holiday's got at least one or two diving plays, I think, over at second base. He's showing off the range. He's showing off the instinct. I mean, the bar, I imagine, is very high with these guys defensively, just based on past prospects and past discussions as well with this organization. Like, of course, they're not perfect, but I mean, you just look at these guys, it's the bats for me that make you say they're capable enough, I think, at this level where you can bring them up and they'll learn on the fly.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like we haven't seen these kids come up. Gunnar Henderson, look, in the beginning of last year when he's playing third base, he was missing some routine balls. He was throwing balls away. And obviously we mentioned the ball he threw away in Pittsburgh. That's a little bit different. He was trying to make an amazing play there. But he's become one of the best defensive shortstops in the game probably at this point. I mean, you saw him improve during the season defensively as well as offensively. So it's not like these guys couldn't come up, and you just teach them on the fly, and hopefully they don't cost you anything in the meantime. But these guys are going to be really good defensively. So I agree.
Tim DeJohn doesn't raise no wimps. He raised these kids right. They're going to be perfectly fine defensively. Shout out Tim DeJohn.
We'll go back to the majors now. And this question from the Bird is the word. The offense has struggled since the first two Angels games. What's the answer? Why do we struggle so much against left-handed pitching? We touched on this a little bit in our episode earlier this week about the majors, but I think this is an opportunity to maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of the struggles. And I'll start with Nick here.
Like I said earlier, I think it's just the guys you're counting on to step up and hit well against lefties to start this season are just cold to start the year, and that's really unfortunate. So really just unfortunate timing. It then some like major indictment against this roster and the idea that they can't hit lefties. And I'll pull this up. I actually pulled this up from an article written on Camden Chat, I think like a couple of days ago. I don't know when exactly it was. And I did not jot down the title. So shout out to Camden Chat because I know they use a lot of our tweets and stuff and everything. But I don't remember the name of the article or who wrote it. I messed up there. My apologies. But in this article, they noted that last year as a team, the Orioles hit 260 with a 334 on base percentage and a 764 OPS against lefties. That was actually better than what they did against righties, which was a 254 average, a 316 on base percentage, and a 733 OPS against righties. And it's virtually the same team was their point, one of the points that they made in that article. So I just think it's, again, just unfortunate timing. This was their plan. I can't fault the Orioles' plan and how they stacked this roster to begin the year, knowing they were going to go up against a gauntlet of lefties. And just unfortunately, the bats couldn't produce for them in this 2-week sample.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. First, the guys that have done well, Ryan Mountcastle, off to a great start. He crushes lefties, pretty much has continued to do so. And Jorge Mateo actually off to a really good start because he's almost playing exclusively against lefties and he's batting .308 with an .896 OPS, 13 at bats. So let's keep that in perspective. But, you know, if you look at the guys who have been performing well so far this year that don't get the starts against left-handed pitching, that'd be Colton Cowser, who has an OPS just under 1,100 in 11 at bats. You got Ryan O'Hearn with an OPS over 1,000 over his 18 at bats. Those guys don't play against lefties. Jordan Westberg, he's got a 597 OPS. He's your lefty guy. Ramon Arias obviously has one hit, a single on the year. He's a lefty guy. We know Austin Hayes batting 077 with a 249 OPS. James McCann, he had a game-winning hit, so can't complain too much, but he's a guy that plays a lot against lefties, 643 OPS. So, yeah, I think it's just the guys that tend to get in against lefties are not performing against lefties to date, and the guys that have been performing so far this year have only been playing mostly against right-handed pitchers. So I think it's going to be fine in the long run. Like you said, we did better against lefties than we did against righties last year, and it's so few games that like one good game against lefty and all of a sudden those numbers are going to look more respectable. So let's give it a little more time, but we could also make a move or two. You know, Kjerstad, Stowers, they hit lefties well. Mayo and Norby, obviously, and I think Holiday will be fine against lefties as well. So if and when those guys come up, they should help.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think that it's just been kind of an unfortunate timing where your hitters that are in there to face left-handed pitchers aren't hitting well. And really, the only guy that I think it speaks to a larger trend would be Cedric Mullins, because Mullins has never hit lefties particularly well. But when Mullins is in a slump, which Mullins is in right now, he doesn't hit lefties at all. I think we know that. And then you add on to that Austin Hayes, Ramon Arias not hitting particularly well. James McCann, I think, has been kind of uneven to this point. I think would be a fair way to describe it. But if just one of them could get going here in the coming weeks, that would help. Now, the Orioles are about to go through a stretch where they're going to face a lot of right-handed pitchers. So I think this is going to be an interesting test for this lineup to see, okay, if they come out and the bats break out against the Red Sox and the Brewers, does that mean that the issues are limited to left-handed pitching? Or is it just a coincidence? It's going to take a while to find out, but we'll have to wait and see. I think it's possible it could be a coincidence, or it might be that they have to fine-tune that part of the roster a little bit.
It's me, isn't it? Okay. Ben would like to know Orioles status one on Twitter. If you don't mind giving him a follow, you probably already do. If the three of you had a Lego build off like Gunnar and Kowser do, who would win and what would you build? Any Lego experience here, Nick?
Not in like 25, 30 years. Even my kids aren't really into Legos yet. So I don't know. This one's on you guys.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me too. I actually Googled this in preparation of this question. I learned that there is an architecture series, and the Guggenheim Museum looks kind of interesting, but it sells for $184 used on eBay. So I'm probably not getting around to that anytime soon.
I've honestly never been a big Lego guy. My son got into it for a little bit. I had fun putting some of those things together, but that is not soothing for me. That gives me anxiety. I'm like, I lost the piece. Oh man, my back hurts. I'm sitting here. Like, I just want to get this done. Like, it's not, I know it's relaxing for some people. It wasn't for me. So I would put my money on Zach winning this competition, but I would build probably, I know those guys love their Star Wars stuff. I'd probably go more Marvel over Star Wars, or like the Statue of Liberty, or something like that with one of those big sets.
So thanks for the attempt at a fun question there. Sorry we burst that bubble as us non-Lego people here. But Billy of Bird Notice podcast, shout out Billy. He asks, with expectations now a thing, and with no manager ever really leaving on their own terms, at what point does Hyde end up on the hot seat? Bob?
I think it's ridiculous that you would ever ask this question, Billy. You should be ashamed. No, he was scared to ask it, but I think it could happen. I think probably not this year. No matter what, I would say he ain't getting fired in 2024, and probably not even in 2025. But I think if the Orioles severely disappoint expectations this year, and he's like arguing with he's just got to, if he disagrees with the front office, that's when he's on the hot seat. If he's doing what they want and they're coming together and it's a us failure for expectations, then I think he gets another year. And maybe if it happens again 2 years in a row, then it's like, okay, we have to see what's going on here. But he's still a great clubhouse guy, unless something changes and he's causing issues for whatever reason, which I can't see it. He's so on board, and I think Elias is so on board with him. I just think it would take quite a bit for that to happen.
Fully agree. I think it's a long, long ways off. The two things that I would look at are, do the Orioles hit a point where they're just kind of stagnant? And I don't mean that they have seasons like last year where they win over 100 games and they keep losing in the playoffs. I'm talking maybe they win 90 games this year, 88 the year after that, 88 again the year after that. They just kind of hit this ground where they're a good team, but not a great team, and the front office feels like they could be doing better. That's when I would start to look at it. But I think that Hyde is a long, long ways off from being on the hot seat at this point. And I think that Bob touched on what's a really important point here, which is that the relationship with the front office is what's going to carry things. Not that he has to be a yes man, but if the front office feels like they have a reliable voice in the dugout and things just aren't working for whatever reason, I think that they're going to try to figure out, what can we do better and what information can we give Brandon Hyde to make the team perform better before they start looking at switching out the manager spot.
Yeah, I just love Hyde. I'm not gonna lie. I've said this for a while. I feel like he's a good mix of that you don't see too often. A really good mix of I'm gonna trust Sig, and I'm gonna I don't know how this is in the room when they're all meeting, but I feel like it's Sig and Elias and some others in that brain room are talking about things, and Hyde's just like, tell me what I need to do. Like, some of that stuff just goes way over his head. At the end of the day, he's an old school baseball guy, but like, he understands the advanced analytics and he respects all of that, but he can help translate that to the younger kids. He can help keep this clubhouse together. I think it's a really good mix of old and new school. and just a guy. Clearly, this team plays extremely hard for him. He will literally fight the other team for his guys, which I absolutely love. This team doesn't have to win the World Series this year for us to look back and consider it a successful year either. Like, they just made it to the first round of the playoffs last year and got swept. Like, there's still more that this team can do this year without winning the World Series that I think fans, it's going to take some time, obviously, after that season ends, if it's not a World Series win, but to look back and say, all right, that was a good year. We took a step forward. And I think it was on a recent episode of Rates and Barrels. It might have been the one with Britt Giroli was on recently with them. But I think they were talking about like an opposing executive because they had a discussion about new ownership coming in. And I think it was Britt Giroli who had said that an opposing executive made some comment about something to the effect of Elias hasn't been allowed to open up the wallet yet. And if he has that ability now, then the rest of the league is in trouble. And so, like, is that the case? We know Elias likes his guys. We know Elias likes to show off to the rest of the league and prove to the rest of the league we can scout and draft and develop our own guys. But if he's been handcuffed and not been able to spend money, and now he is allowed to, and he wants to, and he does, like, this could be a lot of fun. This next offseason could be the most fun we've had in years. And so, yeah, unless something just drastically goes wrong, I don't see him being on the hot seat for a couple of years.
Wrap up here with this question from Matt W. Who is Davy Cruz, and why will he be this year's breakout pitcher? Start with Nick.
That is a good question. I would love for Davy Cruz to be this year's breakout pitcher, but I do think a lot has to go right for him to be a true breakout. He's 20. I don't think he's 21 yet. He's 20 years old.
Just turned 20.
Wow. He should be like 24. So just turned 20. He's up in Aberdeen. The fastball velo is not going to blow you away. I think it's like a low 90s, but he's got 4 or 5 different pitches, decent ground ball numbers throughout his career up to this point. The thing, I think we just talked about this probably the last time I was on. It's been a couple weeks since I've been on, but the strikeout rate his first time through Delmarva was like 21%, and then the walk rate was 15%. That's not good. He repeated Delmarva, and the strikeout rate went up to 25%, and the walk rate dropped to 12%. So that needs to be improved upon, but he's a lanky lefty. He pitched, 2 innings the other night, and if I recall, it looks like he's bulked up a little bit. He's a little bit bigger. He doesn't like disappear when he turns sideways like he did these last couple of years. But like maybe he adds a few more ticks of velo now that he's a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger. But he doesn't have the velo that Luis De Leon does. He doesn't have the secondaries that Luis De Leon does. But there's a good frame there, I think, with De Leon or with Davy Cruz. Like, I've watched so much Davy Cruz these last 2 years. I feel like he should be like 24, 25 years old, not someone who just turned 20. But
yeah, I was going to say, for a guy who we thought might be trapped at Delmarva, he just turned 20 years old. That's pretty crazy. I did not realize he was quite that young either, but he could definitely break. I don't know if he would be the breakout. He could definitely break out a little bit. He's got some funkiness to his delivery. You know, he's got different pitches and he can mix it up. He doesn't have the pure stuff like Nick was saying that I don't think is going to wow you like a De Leon, but I think the point stands though that what Matt is saying is like these international pitchers are coming up and eventually we're going to have the Samuel Basayo, but on the international pitching front. And I'd love to know more about Georgiani Casimiri as well, who they just signed randomly into Delmarva. I don't know. I just love the name, and it's always interesting to me when they sign these guys out of nowhere and then give them a role immediately. But Davy Cruz, yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's probably long-term, probably a reliever. Maybe he could be a version of Danny Coulomb at some point in his career. I don't know. But yeah, I like the guy. I'm rooting for him. But one of these international guys is going to break out.
The big thing with Cruz is the command. And one of the things that really encouraged me last year was that after he got off to a bad start in terms of his walks, his numbers were okay otherwise, but his walk totals were not good early on last year. He was drastically better over the summer months. And just to put this into perspective, He threw 10 and 2/3 innings in the month of April last year. He walked 12 batters in that span while striking out 15. You flash ahead over the next few months. 11 walks in 20 and 2/3 innings in May, 12 walks in 22 innings in June, and then it came way down in July and August. 4 walks in 18 innings pitched, 6 walks in 20 innings in the month of August, and then September, 5 walks in 5 and 2/3, but that's only over 2 outings at the very end of the season. You kind of write that off for the fluke that it is. He's making strides with his control, and if he's able to sustain that at Aberdeen, it's going to go a long way for him being successful. I agree with both of you that the stuff does not jump out at you the way it does with Luis Day.
Did he freeze?
Yeah, I thought it was me.
Oh, but yeah, I like Zach's point there. That
Here this season because of the
Oh,
strides
there you go.
he made with his command last year.
We got you. You froze on us for like a solid 30 seconds there, probably.
Oh,
But yeah, the David Cruz and the second half of the season and not walking guys, that is huge. And I feel like that's probably why they did bump him up to Aberdeen this year. What did he? I don't know what he did the other day. I think he had 1 walk and like 2 strikeouts in 2 innings. Yeah, he's so young. I did not realize he was just 20 years old. He was born in 2004, which is crazy. Yeah, these young guys, it'll be interesting to see who pops because it was Luis De Leon last year and he popped in a major way. I think he's still severely underrated. We'll see who it is this year.
and that does it for this week's episode. We will be back next week to talk about all things majors and minors for the Orioles. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. Be sure to check out our Patreon community as well as our Substack newsletter. And you can have a sample of it all if you sign up for our Discord community. There is a link to that in our episode notes. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.